Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. I was on our first trip to Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. Both my daughter, age 7, and I had never been there before. My husband wanted it to be a surprise for my daughter until the day of leaving. This created anxiety for me, as it's tough to keep a surprise, especially one that big. Plus, I had to pack without my daughter noticing. Moreover, traveling causes high anxiety for me, and we were going to Walt Disney World, which had been a long-time dream for me since I was little. The one thing I worried about was chronic back pain. I had a spinal fusion in 2014 on S1, L4, and L5 due to chronic pain in my lumbar spine. I did this after trying nearly everything else, and the insurance company told me that I needed surgery. Subsequently, the surgery put pressure on my SI joints, which the doctor wanted to fix with more surgery. I decided not to get the surgery because it meant 6 weeks of healing after each side was done. That was too much time away from work, and I believed I would only make my pain worse and cause further damage. I had chronic pain throughout my entire body, and that extended to my hands and feet. I took heavy pain medications for it. Adding to that, allergies, asthma, as well as endometriosis since my early 30s, ulcers since I was 16. I didn't want any of my other health issues to interfere with enjoying a Disney vacation. My husband, daughter, and I went with his parents so they could share in my daughter's first experience. I figured since we were in Central Florida, my allergies would act up as they did in Jamaica on our honeymoon. In Jamaica, most of the resort was outside in the open air except for the rooms. I had trouble breathing after just being there for a few days. I spent most of the time in the room, so prior to going to Disney World, I went to the doctors and asked for a steroid script in the event I needed them down in Florida. I had never been to Central Florida, but figured it was jungle-like and lush like Jamaica. The first day we were there consisted mostly of traveling and settling into the hotel. In the evening, we swam in the pool. I felt fine, but my allergies and asthma started acting up. So the following morning, I started the steroids. I didn't want our trip to be bogged down because of sneezing, headaches, and shortness of breath. My daughter and I, being huge fans of Disney, were in awe of how magical it was. Since I was so excited, it was a little overwhelming to take it all in. I did have a little nausea in the morning, along with my allergies acting up, but other than that, I seemed fine. It was a very busy day, but my back didn't hurt too much more than usual. I was happy about that. The third day was Mother's Day, and we had another full day of Disney. My allergies seemed to be in check from the steroids, but I had nausea again and ended up throwing up. I kept the nausea and vomiting a secret because I figured it was my ulcers that had recently come back. I didn't want to dampen anyone's spirits, so I just didn't say anything to my husband. The rest of the day, I had moderate allergy symptoms, and my back and chronic pain were doing well, considering all the running around. We ended up going to bed around 10 or 11 and were excited for our 4th day at the parks. We had another 2 full days at the parks planned and were equipped with fast passes. Around 1 or 2 a.m., I awoke very nauseous and began vomiting heavily in the bathroom. My throat was swollen, my abdomen and chest hurt, and I was freezing due to a high temperature after the 3rd or 4th time vomiting. By then, everything hurt. I was freezing and attempted to wake my husband to help me. He brushed it off and figured I had food poisoning and probably one too many drinks at dinner the night before. He was of no help and I was on my own. I continued to throw up and my pain level was skyrocketing. I was in so much pain and couldn't do anything to help because it would just come back up. Every minute felt like hours. I was in so much pain, I couldn't bear it. Finally, around 6 or 7, my husband woke up I threw up maybe 6 or 7 times, and then I was dry heaving. I couldn't move although I tried. I definitely knew something was wrong. My husband reluctantly asked me if I needed to be driven to the hospital. I told him, yes. I said goodbye to my daughter and kissed and hugged her. I told her I would be okay. He took my daughter to the room where my in-laws were staying. I explained what was going on. I didn't want to ruin a day at Disney, but couldn't even get up to change my clothes at this point. My husband looked up hospitals online and found one 45 minutes away. He told me how long the trip was, and I told him that was too far. I didn't know how long I would make the drive, so he asked if I needed an ambulance. I told him yes. So he called down for the front desk, and an ambulance was there to pick me up within 20 minutes or so. By then, it was 8:30 a.m., and I was in so much pain. It hurt my body to even lie down on the hard bed in the ambulance. Every bone in my body ached. They examined me and said I had flu-like symptoms and was dehydrated. They tried to start an IV of fluids. I was so dehydrated that it took 3 tries to get an IV started. After they stabilized me, they took me to the nearest hospital. It was a Disney hospital and it was super close. At first, it didn't seem as though I would be admitted. My mouth was so dry, but they wouldn't allow me anything to drink, so I wouldn't throw up again. Every minute felt like an eternity, and my health continued to worsen. They finally allowed me a small cup of iced water. They did an X-ray and a CT scan of my abdomen and chest. The first time they did it was around 10:15 a.m. I could barely lie down. They suspected pneumonia and decided that they were going to admit me. They tried to repeat the test around 2 p.m. I was screaming in pain. I told them that I would lie down for the CT once they were done with whatever they were doing, but that I couldn't lie flat for any longer than that. Once the results came back from the CT scans, the doctor came in and told my husband how sick I was and that we had to start talking about life support because my lungs were failing and I was in septic shock. My husband was shocked and pained by the news, and I was relieved. I wanted to die. I was in so much pain. I figured if I had to go on life support, it made sense. I was immediately rushed to the ICU. On arrival, I was short of breath and in severe distress. My pulse oximetry was in the low 80s on oxygen at 15 liters per minute. I was initially placed on a high-flow oxygen system with FiO2 100%, only to increase saturation to 88%. I was tachypneic with my respiratory rate in the 50s. I was then intubated with mechanical ventilation. My husband was by my side just before they intubated me, and I remember him telling me to come back to him and that he loved me. I felt no pain after I was intubated. It was like I was present at the hospital and watching what was going on. Later that day, they did a bronchial lavage and pulled out a mucus plug that was large and had little tiny tentacles from being in my airways. It was so large, the physician's assistant saved it to show her medical students. She later told me that she had never seen one so large. She was the very same physician assistant who admitted me to the hospital. They repeated the test on Friday of that week. I was still intubated, but I remember them doing it twice. I remember there were several people around while they redid the test. The second time, they took several shot glass-sized vials full of fluid. During the time I was intubated, I recall my husband by my side, holding my hand with both hands and almost burying his head in them, while tears filled his eyes, telling me to come back and how much he loved me. It was as if no time was going on, but everything was happening at once. I remember seeing my mom, who'd passed away 7 years prior, and her telling me it wasn't my time. We seemed to go back and forth for a little bit. I felt so good. My body wasn't in pain, and I felt an amazing sense of love and joy. She said to me, "Ed, my husband, and Callie, my daughter, still need you, so get your ass out of bed." It was a Monday, the day I entered the hospital and was intubated, and they tried to take me on that Friday. When I awoke, I don't really remember that day. I guess I tried to get out of bed like my mom told me to, and they wouldn't let me. I wasn't going down without a fight though. As I began to get violent, Ed got nervous. His good friend drove him where he lived a few hours away to meet up with him because he had heard the news. Once he got to the hospital, Ed asked the male nurse what he should do. The nurse was attempting to sedate me, and he responded, "Run, Ed, run." So he left, and the nurse gave me several sedatives to finally get me back down. I slept the night and awoke the next day to hallucinations. I was incoherent and saw weird things on the walls. Everything I saw was weird and psychedelic. I was asking Ed why it looked that way, and we came to the conclusion that I was hallucinating. I had never been through that before, so I didn't know what it was like. When I awoke, I had many questions. I guess Ed didn't tell his parents I was intubated until they left on Wednesday. They knew I was at the hospital. He didn't want his mom and dad to worry about me the rest of the trip. We still had Monday and Tuesday passes to the parks and days planned, so my in-laws and Callie finished the trip. He told them just before they left. My mother-in-law felt like she was abandoning her son during the worst nightmare. However, she knew Callie needed to get back to school. Ed and I compared notes when I awoke. I told him I remembered the Bronx being done and him telling me to come back. I told him I saw my mom and she told me to get my butt out of bed. He figured it was just a dream or the intubation meds. He believes that it was the medications that got me up. He told me that my temperature was so high they had ice packs all over me. He told the nurses they were lucky I wasn't up. I get cold very easily and wouldn't like that even in the summer. He told me about this one male nurse that took care of me most of the time I was there. He was a large nurse who was from one of the islands as he had an accent. Ed said, after a while, that I only responded to that nurse. The nurse was leaving for his weekend on Friday and wouldn't be there. So he warned Ed that I may not talk or walk when I get up, so not to expect it. He was preparing Ed for what was in store for me. Everyone that had taken care of me came to him to tell me how amazed they were at my recovery rate. I was able to walk and talk on the second day after being intubated. I was weak and a little frail, but I was recovering so quickly. They told me they did not expect me to recover so quickly. They were all wonderful, and I am grateful they were there for me. I stayed in the ICU until Monday, when I quickly recovered enough to be put in a regular room. After being intubated, I had not been able to sleep. So when I moved to a regular room, I asked for some Benadryl. That evening, the male nurse from the ICU came to visit me. He hugged me and told me how worried I made him and couldn't believe I was out of ICU so quickly he had to see it for himself. I stayed one more night, and on Tuesday, I was ready to leave. They struggled with the pulse ox to get my oxygen, but finally got a reading. I was well enough to leave the hospital. The doctor wanted me to stay in the area for one more night in case anything happened. So my husband took me to Disney, where we got a room at one of the less expensive hotels and were able to go back to downtown Disney for dinner and shopping. We went home the following day. Since then, I've been to so many doctors and specialists to try to tie all my health information together. It didn't seem coincidental that I had so many health issues and then this on top. I've been to several specialists at the Cleveland Clinic, including a neurologist. I've been diagnosed with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, an autonomic autoimmune dysfunction. It is on the Lambert-Eaton scale. They still don't have a definitive diagnosis.